You walk into a room and immediately feel the weight of everyone's problems settling on your shoulders like a heavy cloak. The friend who's struggling with their relationship looks at you with those eyes that say, "Fix this for me." The family member drowning in their own chaos reaches out, and somehow you become their lifeline. The stranger at work who can't seem to get their life together gravitates toward you, sensing something in your presence that whispers, "I can save you." And you say yes. You always say yes, because somewhere deep inside, you believe this is your purpose. You believe this is love. You believe this is what makes you worthy of existing in this world. But what if I told you that this compulsion to rescue others is not the noble calling you think it is? What if this need to be needed is actually a psychological prison disguised as virtue? What if your savior complex is not saving anyone at all, but slowly erasing you from your own life? Tonight, we descend into the shadowy realm of the helper who cannot stop helping, the giver who gives until there is nothing left, the rescuer who drowns while trying to save others from waters they may not even want to escape. This is not a gentle exploration of compassion. This is an excavation of the unconscious patterns that turn empathy into addiction, service into self-destruction, and love into a slow form of spiritual suicide. The savior complex is not born from strength. It is born from a wound so deep that most who carry it cannot see its edges. It whispers to you in the language of righteousness, convincing you that your worth depends on your ability to fix what is broken in others. It tells you that love must be earned through sacrifice, that connection requires you to bleed for those you care about, that to be chosen you must first prove you are useful. But here is what the savior complex does not tell you. It is not about them. It has never been about them. It is about you and the hungry ghost that lives in your chest, feeding on the illusion that if you can just heal enough people, save enough souls, carry enough burdens, you will finally be safe from abandonment. You will finally be enough. I have walked through the dreams of those possessed by this complex, and they are always the same. A figure stands in a burning building, carrying person after person to safety, but the fire never stops spreading. Their clothes are singed, their lungs filled with smoke, their body screaming for rest, but they cannot stop. They cannot stop because they believe that if they do, everyone will die. They believe the fire will consume everything. They believe they are the only one who can save the world. But when they finally collapse, when their body gives out and they can carry no more, the building does not crumble. The people do not die. The fire, it turns out, was not real. It was a projection of their own inner burning, their own unquenched need to feel necessary, to feel irreplaceable, to feel like their existence has meaning beyond their own ability to endure. The savior complex is a form of spiritual narcissism dressed in the robes of selflessness. It says, I am special because I can handle what others cannot. I am chosen because I can carry what others will not. I am valuable because without me, they would be lost. It feeds on the drama of rescue, the intoxication of being needed, the secret pleasure of being the one who understands, who sacrifices, who saves. Do you feel the discomfort rising as I speak these words? Do you feel the urge to defend your helping, to explain how your situation is different, how the people in your life really do need you? That resistance is not your conscience speaking. That is the complex itself, protecting its territory, defending its right to consume you in the name of love. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman who came to me after 20 years of marriage to a man who could not hold a job, could not manage his emotions, could not function without her constant intervention. She paid his bills, made his appointments, cleaned up his messes, and called it love. She enabled his helplessness and called it compassion. She sacrificed her dreams for his comfort and called it devotion. When I asked her what would happen if she stopped rescuing him, her face went pale. He would fall apart, she whispered. He might hurt himself. He might leave me. And there it was, the truth beneath the savior complex, the terror of abandonment disguised as concern for another. She was not saving him. She was holding him hostage to her own fear of being alone. The savior complex thrives in the space between genuine care and unconscious control. It masquerades as love while practicing manipulation. It offers help while creating dependency. It promises healing while perpetuating wounds. Those who carry it become emotional drug dealers, providing relief that prevents true recovery, offering solutions that ensure the problem continues. But why does this pattern develop? Why do some souls become so addicted to rescuing others that they lose themselves in the process? The answer lies not in their present relationships, but in their past, in the original wound that taught them love was conditional, that safety required them to be useful, that their needs were less important than everyone else's comfort. Perhaps you were the child who learned to soothe your mother's anxiety, to manage your father's anger, to hold the family together through your own emotional labor. Perhaps you discovered that when you helped others, you received approval, attention, a momentary reprieve from the chaos around you. Perhaps you learned that your pain was inconvenient, but your ability to ease others' pain was valuable. The child who becomes a savior is often the child who was never saved. They learned to give what they never received, to offer what they desperately needed, to become the parent they wished they had. They turned their unmet needs into a mission, their abandonment into a calling, their wounds into weapons of service. But here is what that child could not understand. You cannot heal your own neglect by neglecting yourself for others. You cannot fill your own emptiness by emptying yourself for everyone else. You cannot earn the love you never received by loving others to the point of self-destruction. The savior complex is not love. It is trauma in disguise. It is the endless repetition of your original wounding, played out on the stage of adult relationships. Every person you rescue becomes a stand-in for the child you once were, the child who needed saving but learned to save others instead. Every crisis you resolve becomes an attempt to rewrite your own story, to finally be the hero you needed when you were small and scared and alone. But trauma cannot be healed through repetition. It can only be healed through recognition, through the courage to stop running from your own pain long enough to feel it, to name it, to honor it. The savior complex keeps you running, keeps you busy, keeps you focused on everyone else's problems, so you never have to face your own. This is why those with savior complexes are often exhausted, anxious, resentful beneath their helpful exterior. They give and give and give, but they never receive. They pour themselves out like water, but they never allow themselves to be filled. They become experts at reading others' needs while remaining blind to their own. The pattern is always the same. They attract people who need saving, who are broken enough to require constant attention, but not broken enough to be completely hopeless. They create relationships based on inequality, where they are the giver and the other is the taker, where they are the strong one and the other is the weak one, where they are the solution and the other is the problem. But what happens when the person they are trying to save begins to heal? What happens when they no longer need rescuing? What happens when they start to stand on their own, to make their own decisions, to create their own life? The savior complex cannot tolerate this. It needs broken people to feel whole. It needs problems to solve to feel valuable. It needs others to be helpless to feel powerful. And so, unconsciously, subtly, the savior begins to sabotage the very healing they claim to promote. They create new crises, they point out new problems, they remind the other of their weaknesses, their failures, their need for help. They become invested in the other's brokenness because their own identity depends on it. This is the dark secret of the savior complex. It does not want to save anyone. It wants to be needed. It does not want to heal anyone. It wants to be irreplaceable. It does not want to love anyone. It wants to be loved in return for its service, its sacrifice, its endless giving. But love that must be earned is not love at all. It is a transaction. It is a contract written in blood and signed with exhaustion. It is a prison built from good intentions and locked with the key of fear. The person with a savior complex lives in constant terror of being discovered as unnecessary, of being seen as just another human being with needs and limitations and flaws. They have built their entire identity around being the one who helps, the one who gives, the one who saves. Without this role, they do not know who they are, and so they continue the pattern, attracted to the wounded, the chaotic, the needy. They enter relationships not as equals but as therapists, not as partners but as parents, not as lovers but as lifeguards. They choose people who will never quite get better, who will always need just a little more help, who will keep them feeling useful and important and safe from the terrifying possibility of being loved simply for who they are. But the cost of this complex is not just personal. It ripples outward, affecting everyone it touches. The person being saved never learns to save themselves. They become dependent, helpless, resentful of their own weakness. They lose their power, their autonomy, their ability to grow. They become children in adult bodies, waiting for someone else to solve their problems, to make their decisions, to live their lives. The savior complex creates what it claims to heal: more brokenness, more dependency, more pain. It perpetuates the very problems it seeks to solve because it needs those problems to exist. It is a parasite that feeds on suffering while wearing the mask of compassion. And the savior themselves? They become hollow, emptied out, a shell of service with no substance inside. They lose touch with their own needs, their own desires, their own dreams. They become so focused on everyone else's life that they forget to live their own. They become ghosts haunting their own existence, present but not really there, helping but not really living. This is the tragedy of the savior complex. In trying to save everyone else, you lose yourself. In trying to heal every wound but your own, you become the walking wounded. In trying to be everything to everyone, you become nothing to yourself. But recognition is the first step toward freedom. If you see yourself in these words, if you feel the uncomfortable stirring of truth in your chest, then you are already beginning to wake up. The complex thrives in darkness, in the unconscious repetition of patterns you do not understand. But when you name it, when you see it clearly, you begin to reclaim your power. The journey out of the savior complex is not easy. It requires you to face the original wound, to feel the pain you have been running from, to acknowledge the child within who still believes love must be earned through service. It requires you to disappoint people, to set boundaries, to say no to the very thing that has defined your worth for so long. But on the other side of this journey lies something precious: the ability to love without losing yourself, to help without becoming hollow, to care without becoming consumed. The ability to be of service from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion. The path away from the savior complex begins with a single terrifying realization: you must learn to save yourself first, not in the way the world teaches self-care, with bubble baths and affirmations, but in the ancient way of soul retrieval, of calling back the parts of yourself you scattered like breadcrumbs in the forest of other people's needs. This is not a gentle process. It is an excavation of the self, an archaeology of the soul that requires you to dig through layers of conditioning, through decades of learned helplessness disguised as helpfulness. You must unearth the child who learned that love was something to be earned rather than something to be received, who discovered that their pain was inconvenient, but their ability to ease others' pain was valuable. I remember working with a man named David, a therapist who had spent 30 years healing others, while his own inner world crumbled like ancient parchment. He came to me not because he wanted to change, but because his body had begun to rebel. Chronic fatigue, insomnia, a nervous system so overstimulated from absorbing everyone else's trauma that he could no longer distinguish his own emotions from those of his clients. "I don't know who I am when I'm not helping someone," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. And there it was, the confession that every person with a savior complex must eventually make. They have become so identified with their role as rescuer that they have forgotten the person beneath the performance. The savior complex is a form of identity theft, but you are both the thief and the victim. You steal from your own authenticity to create a persona that others need, that others find useful, that others will not abandon. But in doing so, you abandon yourself so completely that you become a stranger in your own life. This is why the journey away from the complex feels like death, because in many ways it is. The person you have been, the helper, the giver, the one who always has the answer, must die for the authentic self to be born. And death, even symbolic death, is terrifying. It asks you to leap into the unknown, to release the identity that has kept you safe, to trust that something real exists beneath the mask of service. But what lies beneath is not emptiness, as the complex would have you believe. What lies beneath is a soul that has been waiting, sometimes for decades, to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be allowed to exist without justification. What lies beneath is a person with their own needs, their own dreams, their own right to take up space in the world. The first step in this resurrection is learning to recognize the difference between genuine compassion and compulsive rescuing. Genuine compassion flows from a place of fullness, from a soul that has learned to tend its own garden first. It offers presence without attachment to outcome, support without the need to control, love without the expectation of return. Compulsive rescuing, on the other hand, flows from emptiness, from a wound that believes it can heal itself by healing others. It offers help with strings attached, support with hidden agendas, love with the silent demand for gratitude, loyalty, and eternal need. The difference is subtle but profound. Genuine compassion empowers the other to find their own strength, their own solutions, their own path. Compulsive rescuing creates dependency, weakness, and the very helplessness it claims to cure. One builds bridges that others can cross on their own. The other builds cages disguised as safe houses. Learning to distinguish between these two requires you to develop what I call the inner witness, the part of you that can observe your motivations without judgment, that can ask the uncomfortable questions. Why am I helping this person? What do I need from this interaction? What am I afraid will happen if I don't rescue them? These questions are not meant to shame you for helping others. They are meant to illuminate the unconscious patterns that drive your behavior, to bring light to the shadow motivations that the complex prefers to keep hidden. Because until you know why you help, you cannot know whether your help is healing or harming. The inner witness also helps you recognize the signs of complex activation. The sudden urgency you feel when someone is in crisis, the way your heart races when you encounter someone who needs saving, the almost compulsive need to fix, to solve, to make better. These are not signs of compassion. They are signs of addiction, the addiction to being needed, to being useful, to being the solution to someone else's problem. Like all addictions, the savior complex requires increasingly stronger doses to achieve the same effect. The problems you choose to solve become more complex. The people you choose to save become more broken. The crises you choose to manage become more dramatic. What started as helping a friend through a rough patch escalates to managing their entire life, making their decisions, carrying their responsibilities as if they were your own. And like all addictions, the savior complex lies to you about its necessity. It tells you that without your intervention, everything will fall apart. It tells you that you are the only one who can help, the only one who understands, the only one who cares enough to make a difference. It tells you that your sacrifice is noble, your exhaustion is virtuous, your self-neglect is love. But these are the lies of the complex, not the truth of your soul. The truth is that most people are far more capable than the savior complex allows them to be. The truth is that by constantly rescuing others, you rob them of the opportunity to develop their own strength, their own resilience, their own ability to navigate life's challenges. The truth is that your help, no matter how well-intentioned, often becomes a barrier to growth rather than a bridge to healing. When you solve someone's problems for them, you teach them that they are incapable of solving their own problems. When you carry their emotions, you teach them that their feelings are too much for them to handle. When you make their decisions, you teach them that they cannot trust their own judgment. This is the cruel irony of the savior complex. In trying to help others, you often harm them. In trying to love them, you often diminish them. In trying to save them, you often steal from them the very strength they need to save themselves. But perhaps the greatest harm is the harm you do to yourself. Every time you abandon your own needs to meet someone else's, you send a message to your unconscious that you do not matter. Every time you silence your own voice to listen to another's crisis, you tell your soul that its song is not worth hearing. Every time you sacrifice your own well-being for someone else's comfort, you reinforce the belief that your life is less valuable than theirs. This is not love. This is not service. This is not compassion. This is self-abuse disguised as virtue, self-hatred dressed in the robes of righteousness. It is the slow suicide of the soul, carried out one rescue at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one moment of self-abandonment at a time. The savior complex is often rooted in what psychologists call parentification, the process by which a child is forced to take on adult responsibilities, to become the emotional caretaker for their parents or siblings. These children learn that love is conditional, that their worth depends on their ability to fix what is broken, to soothe what is disturbed, to heal what is wounded. They become little therapists, little managers, little saviors in a world that should have protected them, nurtured them, allowed them to be children. They learn to read emotional weather patterns like meteorologists, to anticipate needs like mind readers, to solve problems like tiny engineers of the human heart. But this premature wisdom comes at a cost. The parentified child learns to ignore their own needs, to suppress their own emotions, to become invisible except when they are useful. They learn that their pain is inconvenient, their joy is selfish, their very existence is justified only by their ability to serve others. These patterns formed in childhood become the blueprint for adult relationships. The former parentified child seeks out partners, friends, and even careers that allow them to continue the familiar dance of rescue and sacrifice. They are drawn to the wounded, the chaotic, the needy, not because they are naturally compassionate, but because this is the only way they know how to connect. They mistake intensity for intimacy, crisis for connection, neediness for love. They confuse the adrenaline rush of rescue with the deep satisfaction of genuine relationship. They build their entire identity around being the one who helps, the one who gives, the one who saves, because this is the only version of themselves they have ever known to be acceptable. But identity built on service to others is not identity at all. It is a performance, a role, a character in a play that never ends. The person beneath the savior costume remains unknown, unseen, unloved for who they truly are, rather than what they can provide. Breaking free from the savior complex requires what I call the great refusal. The refusal to be responsible for emotions you did not create, problems you did not cause, lives you did not choose. The refusal to sacrifice your own well-being on the altar of someone else's comfort. The refusal to mistake enablement for love, codependency for connection, self-abandonment for service. This refusal is not cruel, it is sacred. It is the act of reclaiming your own life, your own power, your own right to exist without justification. It is the recognition that you cannot save anyone else until you learn to save yourself, that you cannot love anyone else until you learn to love yourself, that you cannot serve anyone else until you learn to serve your own deepest truth. The great refusal begins with a single word. No. No to the crisis that is not yours to solve. No to the emergency that somehow always seems to emerge when you are finally taking care of yourself. No to the guilt that rises when you choose your own needs over someone else's wants. No to the voice that tells you that setting boundaries is selfish, that self-care is indulgent, that your own well-being is less important than everyone else's comfort. This no is not a rejection of others. It is an acceptance of yourself. It is the recognition that you have the right to your own life, your own energy, your own emotional space. It is the understanding that love does not require you to disappear, that service does not demand your sacrifice, that compassion does not need your self-destruction. Learning to say no is like learning a new language after decades of speaking only yes. It feels foreign, uncomfortable, wrong. The savior complex will resist this new vocabulary with everything it has, sending waves of guilt, shame, and fear to convince you that you are being selfish, that you are abandoning those who need you, that you are betraying your deepest values. But these feelings are not the voice of your conscience. They are the death throes of a complex that has fed on your self-abandonment for so long that it cannot imagine surviving without it. They are the protests of a pattern that has kept you safe through service, valuable through sacrifice, loved through self-loss. The complex will tell you that if you stop saving others, you will be alone. That if you stop rescuing, you will be abandoned. That if you stop being useful, you will be unloved. But these are the fears of a wounded child, not the truth of an awakened adult. The truth is that relationships built on your ability to rescue others are not relationships at all. They are transactions, contracts, exchanges of service for the illusion of connection. Real relationships do not require you to disappear. Real love does not demand your sacrifice. Real connection does not depend on your ability to fix, to heal, to save. Real intimacy happens not when you become everything to someone else, but when you become yourself in the presence of another who is also willing to be themselves. This is the promise that lies beyond the savior complex, the possibility of authentic relationship, genuine love, true service that flows from fullness rather than emptiness, from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion. But to reach this promise, you must first walk through the valley of your own unmet needs, your own unexpressed grief, your own long-buried rage at having been made responsible for things that were never yours to carry. You must descend into the cavern of your own soul and meet the child who learned that love was something to be earned rather than something to be received. This descent is not a comfortable journey. It requires you to feel the feelings you have been helping others avoid, to face the emptiness you have been filling with other people's problems, to sit with the silence you have been drowning out with the noise of constant rescue. It requires you to acknowledge that beneath your helpful exterior lies a wounded being who has been waiting, sometimes for decades, to be seen, to be held, to be loved without condition. The savior complex is masterful at avoiding this inner work. It keeps you so busy with everyone else's healing that you never have time for your own. It creates a constant stream of crises, emergencies, and urgent needs that demand your immediate attention, your complete focus, your total sacrifice. It convinces you that taking time for yourself is selfish, that looking inward is self-indulgent, that your own healing can wait until everyone else is whole. But this is the great deception. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot heal what you have not faced. You cannot love others truly until you learn to love yourself fully. The savior complex creates the illusion of giving while actually taking, the illusion of healing while actually wounding, the illusion of love while actually controlling. I worked with a woman named Maria, whose savior complex manifested in her relationship with her adult daughter. Every time her daughter faced a challenge, Maria would swoop in with solutions, advice, and financial support. When her daughter lost jobs, Maria would help her find new ones. When her daughter had relationship problems, Maria would offer her home as a refuge. When her daughter struggled with addiction, Maria would pay for treatment after treatment, always hoping that this time would be different. But what Maria could not see was that her constant rescuing was preventing her daughter from developing her own resilience, her own problem-solving skills, her own relationship with consequences. Her daughter had learned to expect rescue, to depend on crisis as a way of maintaining connection with her mother, to remain in a state of perpetual helplessness because helplessness guaranteed attention. The turning point came when Maria realized that her need to save her daughter was actually her need to feel needed, to feel important, to feel like she mattered. She was not helping her daughter. She was using her daughter to avoid her own feelings of emptiness, her own fear of abandonment, her own terror of being unnecessary. This realization was devastating. It meant acknowledging that her love, as she had understood it, was actually a form of control. It meant recognizing that her sacrifice was actually a form of selfishness. It meant facing the truth that her helping was actually a form of harm. But this devastation was also liberation, because once Maria could see the pattern clearly, she could begin to change it. She could start to separate her own needs from her daughter's needs, her own emotions from her daughter's emotions, her own life from her daughter's life. She could begin to love her daughter without losing herself, to support her without saving her, to care without controlling. The process was not easy. Every time Maria chose not to rescue, her daughter's crises intensified. Every time she set a boundary, her daughter's accusations grew louder. Every time she refused to enable, her daughter's manipulation became more sophisticated. This is what I call the extinction burst, the final desperate attempt of a dysfunctional system to maintain itself when change is introduced. But Maria held firm. She had learned to distinguish between her daughter's pain and her own pain, between her daughter's responsibility and her own responsibility, between her daughter's choices and her own choices. She had learned that love sometimes looks like saying no, that compassion sometimes requires allowing others to feel the consequences of their actions, that true help sometimes means refusing to help. The transformation was profound. As Maria stopped rescuing, her daughter began to develop her own strength. As Maria stopped enabling, her daughter began to take responsibility for her own life. As Maria stopped controlling, her daughter began to make her own choices. The relationship, which had been built on dysfunction and dependency, slowly began to rebuild itself on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. This is the paradox of the savior complex. The less you try to save others, the more they are able to save themselves. The less you control, the more they are able to grow. The less you enable, the more they are able to heal. Your withdrawal from the role of savior does not harm others. It liberates them to discover their own power, their own resilience, their own capacity for growth. But this liberation requires you to tolerate the discomfort of not being needed, the anxiety of not being in control, the fear of not being useful. It requires you to sit with your own emptiness instead of filling it with other people's problems, to face your own pain instead of numbing it with other people's crises, to feel your own feelings instead of absorbing other people's emotions. The savior complex is, at its core, a sophisticated form of emotional avoidance. It allows you to focus on everyone else's inner world, so you never have to explore your own. It gives you permission to feel deeply about other people's lives while remaining numb to your own. It creates the illusion of emotional engagement while actually protecting you from the vulnerability of genuine feeling. This is why people with savior complexes often describe feeling empty, hollow, like they are going through the motions of life without actually living. They have become so skilled at feeling for others that they have forgotten how to feel for themselves. They have become so attuned to other people's needs that they have lost touch with their own. They have become so good at giving that they have forgotten how to receive. The journey back to yourself requires you to develop what I call fierce self-compassion, not the gentle, nurturing self-compassion that the wellness industry promotes, but the fierce, protective self-compassion that refuses to abandon you to other people's needs. The kind of self-compassion that says no to requests that deplete you, that sets boundaries that protect you, that chooses your own well-being over other people's comfort. This fierce self-compassion is not selfish, it is essential. It is the recognition that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that you cannot give what you do not have, that you cannot love others truly until you learn to love yourself fully. It is the understanding that taking care of yourself is not a luxury but a necessity, not an indulgence but a responsibility. Developing this fierce self-compassion requires you to become intimately familiar with your own needs, your own desires, your own limits. It requires you to learn the language of your own body, to recognize the signals of your own nervous system, to honor the wisdom of your own intuition. It requires you to treat yourself with the same kindness you have been showing others, to speak to yourself with the same gentleness you have been offering strangers. This is often the most difficult part of the journey for people with savior complexes. They have spent so long attending to others that they have forgotten how to attend to themselves. They have become experts at reading other people's emotions while remaining blind to their own. They have developed sophisticated skills for managing other people's crises while feeling helpless in the face of their own challenges. Learning to turn that attention inward feels foreign, uncomfortable, even wrong. The complex will resist this inner focus with everything it has, creating new crises, new emergencies, new people who desperately need your help. It will tell you that self-care is selfish, that introspection is self-indulgent, that your own healing can wait until everyone else is whole. But this is precisely when you must hold firm. This is when you must choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. This is when you must recognize that your own healing is not separate from your ability to help others. It is the foundation upon which all genuine help must be built. The savior complex thrives on the illusion of urgency, the belief that every crisis requires immediate intervention, that every problem needs instant solution, that every person in distress must be rescued right now. But most of the emergencies that activate the complex are not true emergencies at all. They are patterns, repetitions, familiar dramas that have been playing out for months or years or decades. Learning to distinguish between genuine emergencies and manufactured crises is essential for breaking free from the complex. Genuine emergencies are rare, time-limited, and require specific action. Manufactured crises are frequent, ongoing, and designed to maintain attention and control. Genuine emergencies call for help. Manufactured crises call for rescue. The person caught in a savior complex often cannot tell the difference. They respond to every crisis with the same urgency, the same intensity, the same willingness to sacrifice their own well-being. They become addicted to the adrenaline of rescue, the rush of being needed, the high of being the solution to someone else's problem. But this addiction comes at a cost. The constant state of emergency activation takes a toll on the nervous system, leading to chronic stress, anxiety, and exhaustion. The body, designed to handle occasional crises, begins to break down under the weight of constant activation. The mind, meant to solve problems, becomes overwhelmed by the endless stream of other people's difficulties. This is why so many people with savior complexes struggle with physical symptoms that seem to have no medical cause. Chronic fatigue, digestive issues, headaches, insomnia, autoimmune conditions. The body is trying to tell them what their mind refuses to acknowledge, that they are carrying too much, giving too much, sacrificing too much. The path to healing requires you to learn to regulate your own nervous system, to create space between stimulus and response, to develop the capacity to pause before you rescue. It requires you to ask yourself, is this really an emergency? Is this really my responsibility? Is this really helping? Or am I just feeding the pattern? These questions are not meant to make you cold or uncaring. They are meant to help you develop discernment, to learn the difference between genuine compassion and compulsive rescuing, to understand when help is healing and when it is harming. The development of this discernment is a gradual process. It requires you to start small, to practice saying no to minor requests before you tackle major crises. It requires you to notice the physical sensations that arise when you are about to rescue, to recognize the emotional patterns that drive your helping, to understand the unconscious beliefs that make you feel responsible for other people's well-being. This is inner work of the deepest kind. It requires you to excavate the layers of conditioning that have taught you to value others' needs above your own, to explore the childhood experiences that created the belief that love must be earned through service, to understand the ways in which your helping has become a form of hiding. But this excavation is not punishment, it is liberation. Every layer of conditioning you remove reveals more of your authentic self. Every belief you question opens space for new possibilities. Every pattern you interrupt creates room for genuine choice. The journey away from the savior complex is ultimately a journey toward authenticity, toward the person you were before you learned that love was something to be earned rather than something to be received. It is a return to the self that existed before you became convinced that your worth depended on your usefulness, that your safety required your sacrifice, that your love demanded your disappearance. This authentic self is not selfish or uncaring. It is not cold or disconnected. It is not afraid of helping others or incapable of compassion. It is simply whole, complete, sufficient unto itself. It loves from fullness rather than emptiness, gives from abundance rather than scarcity, serves from strength rather than weakness. When you operate from this authentic self, your helping becomes truly helpful. Your love becomes truly loving. Your service becomes truly sacred. Because it comes not from need but from choice, not from compulsion but from freedom, not from fear but from love. This is the gift that lies beyond the savior complex, the ability to be of genuine service in the world, to love without losing yourself, to help without becoming hollow. It is the recognition that you can care deeply without carrying everything, that you can be compassionate without being consumed, that you can serve others while still honoring yourself. But this gift requires sacrifice of a different kind. Not the sacrifice of your needs, your dreams, your well-being, but the sacrifice of the identity that has defined you, the role that has given your life meaning, the complex that has kept you safe through service. This sacrifice is terrifying because it asks you to trust that you are lovable without being useful, that you are valuable without being needed, that you are worthy without being the solution to someone else's problem. It asks you to believe that your existence has meaning beyond your ability to fix, to heal, to save. But this trust is not blind faith, it is hard-won wisdom. It is the understanding that comes from finally learning to save yourself, to heal yourself, to love yourself. It is the recognition that you have always been whole, that you have always been enough, that you have always been worthy of love simply because you exist. This recognition changes everything. It transforms your relationships from transactions to connections, your love from neediness to abundance, your service from compulsion to choice. It allows you to help others without losing yourself, to give without becoming empty, to love without disappearing. The world needs this kind of love, this kind of service, this kind of healing. It needs people who have learned to fill their own cups first, who have developed their own roots before trying to shelter others, who have found their own ground before attempting to lift others up. This is the great work of our time, learning to love without losing ourselves, to serve without becoming servants, to heal without bleeding out our own life force. But the savior complex will not release its grip easily. It has too much invested in your self-abandonment, too much power derived from your powerlessness, too much identity wrapped up in your invisibility. As you begin to withdraw from the role of perpetual rescuer, those around you will not celebrate your awakening. They will resist it. They will escalate their crises, amplify their needs, intensify their demands. They will accuse you of being selfish, of abandoning them, of no longer caring. They will weaponize your compassion against you, using your own empathy as a tool to drag you back into the familiar dance of rescue and sacrifice. This is the test. This is the moment when you discover whether your helping was truly about love or about the avoidance of abandonment. When the people you have been saving turn against you for refusing to save them, you will see clearly the transactional nature of what you believed was unconditional love. You will understand that they never needed you to be whole. They needed you to be broken so they could remain broken themselves. The codependent ecosystem that surrounds the savior complex cannot survive without a willing participant. When you refuse to play your assigned role, the entire system must either evolve or collapse. Some relationships will transform, growing stronger as they shed their dysfunction. Others will end, unable to exist without the imbalance that once sustained them. This loss is grievous. You will mourn not just the relationships themselves, but the version of yourself that existed within them. You will grieve the identity that gave your life structure, the role that made you feel important, the complex that promised you safety through service. You will feel the terror of existing without the armor of helpfulness, the fear of being seen without the costume of selflessness. But this death is also birth. Every ending creates space for beginning. Every loss opens room for discovery. Every identity you release allows a more authentic self to emerge. The person you become when you stop trying to save everyone else is not a stranger. It is the person you were always meant to be. I have witnessed this transformation countless times in my work. The social worker who learns to leave her client's problems at the office and discovers she has forgotten how to dream her own dreams. The mother who stops managing her adult children's lives and remembers she once had ambitions beyond their happiness. The friend who stops being everyone's therapist and finds she has nothing to talk about except other people's problems. The initial emptiness is profound. When you have spent decades filling yourself with other people's experiences, removing them leaves a vacuum that can feel like dying. Who are you when you are not needed? What do you want when you stop wanting things for others? How do you spend your time when you are not solving everyone else's problems? These questions have no easy answers. They require you to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, to tolerate the anxiety of uncertainty, to embrace the vulnerability of discovery. They ask you to become an explorer of your own inner landscape, an archaeologist of your own buried desires, a detective investigating the mystery of your own authentic self. This investigation reveals layers of conditioning so deep you may have forgotten they were not original to you. The belief that your needs are less important than others' needs, the conviction that expressing your own desires is selfish, the fear that if you stop giving, you will have nothing left to offer, the terror that if you stop rescuing, you will be abandoned. Each of these beliefs must be examined, questioned, and ultimately released, not through intellectual understanding alone, but through the lived experience of choosing differently. Each time you honor your own needs, you challenge the belief that they do not matter. Each time you express your own desires, you prove that they are not selfish. Each time you receive without giving in return, you demonstrate that your value is not dependent on your usefulness. This process is not linear. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when a crisis calls and you answer with the same urgency you always have. There will be moments when the guilt of saying no feels unbearable, when the fear of abandonment overwhelms your commitment to yourself. There will be times when you question whether this journey is worth the loneliness, whether authenticity is worth the loss of connection. These moments are not failures, they are part of the process. Recovery from the savior complex is not about perfect boundaries or flawless self-care. It is about gradually shifting the balance, slowly learning to include yourself in the circle of your own compassion, progressively developing the capacity to feel your own feelings without immediately rushing to fix someone else's. The most profound shift occurs when you begin to understand that your worth is not determined by your productivity, your value is not measured by your usefulness, your lovability is not contingent on your ability to solve problems. This understanding does not come through positive thinking or affirmations. It comes through the repeated experience of being loved for who you are rather than what you do. But here lies the paradox. Those who have spent their lives attracting people who need saving must learn to attract people who do not need saving. This requires you to become someone who does not need to be needed, someone who can tolerate being unnecessary, someone who can love without being essential. The transition is jarring. You must learn to navigate relationships without the familiar structure of crisis and rescue. You must develop new ways of connecting that do not depend on your ability to fix, to heal, to solve. You must discover what intimacy looks like when it is not based on inequality, what love feels like when it does not require sacrifice, what service looks like when it flows from choice rather than compulsion. This learning happens slowly, relationship by relationship, interaction by interaction. You practice saying no to requests that deplete you and yes to invitations that nourish you. You experiment with receiving without immediately giving back, with being helped without helping in return, with taking up space without apologizing for your existence. Each of these experiments teaches you something about your authentic self. You discover preferences you never knew you had, desires you never allowed yourself to feel, dreams you never gave yourself permission to pursue. You uncover aspects of your personality that were buried beneath the role of rescuer, talents that were sacrificed to the altar of service, passions that were abandoned in favor of other people's needs. The emergence of this authentic self is both thrilling and terrifying. It is thrilling because you finally begin to feel alive in your own life, present in your own experience, connected to your own desires. It is terrifying because this self is vulnerable in ways the savior complex never was. It can be rejected not for what it fails to do, but for who it actually is. This vulnerability is the price of authenticity. When you love from wholeness rather than woundedness, when you serve from choice rather than compulsion, when you help from strength rather than weakness, you risk being seen and found wanting. You risk being loved and found unlovable. You risk being known and found unworthy. But this risk is also the gateway to genuine connection. Only when you are willing to be seen in your fullness can you be truly met by another. Only when you are willing to be loved for who you are can you experience the love you have always been seeking. Only when you are willing to be known in your authenticity can you know the intimacy you have always craved. The savior complex promised you safety through service, love through sacrifice, connection through caretaking. But it delivered isolation disguised as intimacy, transaction disguised as love, performance disguised as authenticity. It kept you safe from the risk of being truly seen while ensuring you would never be truly known. The journey beyond the complex is a journey toward genuine risk, authentic vulnerability, real connection. It is the path from performing love to being love, from earning worth to embodying worth, from seeking validation to offering truth. This transformation ripples outward in ways you cannot imagine. When you stop trying to save everyone else, you give them permission to save themselves. When you stop absorbing everyone else's emotions, you teach them that their feelings are manageable. When you stop solving everyone else's problems, you demonstrate that they are capable of finding their own solutions. Your withdrawal from the role of savior is not abandonment, it is liberation. It liberates others to discover their own strength, their own resilience, their own capacity for growth. It liberates you to discover your own life, your own dreams, your own purpose beyond the endless cycle of rescue and sacrifice. But perhaps most importantly, it liberates love itself, love that has been trapped in the cage of transaction, bound by the chains of obligation, distorted by the lens of need. When you learn to love without losing yourself, you restore love to its original nature, free, abundant, unconditional. This is the gift you give to the world when you heal your savior complex. Not the gift of your endless service, your constant availability, your perpetual sacrifice, but the gift of your authentic presence, your genuine love, your whole self. The gift of someone who has learned to fill their own cup first, who has developed their own roots before trying to shelter others, who has found their own ground before attempting to lift others up. The world does not need more martyrs. It does not need more people who give until they are empty, who love until they are hollow, who serve until they are spent. The world needs people who have learned to love themselves fully so they can love others truly. It needs people who have healed their own wounds so they can sit with others' pain without absorbing it. It needs people who have found their own wholeness so they can offer genuine help rather than compulsive rescue. This is the sacred work of our time, learning to serve from fullness rather than emptiness, to love from strength rather than weakness, to help from choice rather than compulsion. It is the work of becoming fully human, fully alive, fully present in our own lives while remaining open to the lives of others. The saviour complex is not your true nature. It is a learned response to an unsafe world. It is a survival strategy that served you when you were small and powerless, when your safety depended on your ability to manage the emotions of the adults around you. But you are no longer small. You are no longer powerless. You no longer need to earn your place in the world through service to others. You belong here simply because you exist. You are worthy of love simply because you are. You have the right to your own life, your own dreams, your own happiness. You have the right to say no, to set boundaries, to choose yourself. You have the right to be human, to be flawed, to be ordinary. You have the right to be seen, to be known, to be loved for who you are rather than what you do. This is not selfishness, it is self-respect. It is not narcissism, it is self-love. It is not abandonment of others, it is the foundation upon which genuine service can be built. When you learn to honor your own humanity, you become capable of truly honoring the humanity of others. When you learn to love yourself fully, you become capable of loving others freely. The journey away from the saviour complex is not a journey away from love, it is a journey toward love in its purest form. Love that gives without depleting, that serves without sacrificing, that helps without harming. Love that is strong enough to say no, wise enough to set boundaries, courageous enough to choose authenticity over approval. This love is not soft or weak or passive. It is fierce and strong and active. It is love that protects what is sacred, that guards what is precious, that defends what is true. It is love that refuses to participate in dysfunction, that will not enable destruction, that cannot be manipulated or controlled. This is the love the world needs. This is the service the world requires. This is the healing the world craves. Not the love that sacrifices itself on the altar of others' needs, but the love that honors its own sacredness while serving the highest good of all. The saviour complex ends where authentic love begins, where genuine service flows from wholeness rather than woundedness, where true compassion operates from strength rather than weakness, where real healing happens through presence rather than performance. This is your invitation. This is your calling. This is your path home to yourself. The journey is not easy, but it is necessary. The destination is not comfort, but authenticity. The reward is not the gratitude of those you save, but the deep satisfaction of a life lived in truth. You are not here to save the world. You are here to save yourself, and in saving yourself, you become capable of serving the world in ways the saviour complex never could. You become a beacon of possibility, a living example of what it means to be whole, a demonstration that love does not require sacrifice, that service does not demand self-destruction, that helping others does not mean losing yourself. This is the great work. This is the sacred task. This is the journey from saviour to sovereign, from rescuer to whole human being, from martyr to mystic. The world is waiting for you to complete this journey, not because it needs another saviour, but because it needs another person who has learned to love themselves fully so they can love others truly. The time has come to lay down the burden of everyone else's salvation and pick up the sacred responsibility of your own. The time has come to stop trying to save the world and start living your own life. The time has come to discover who you are when you are not trying to be everything to everyone else. This discovery is not selfish, it is essential. It is not abandonment, it is arrival. It is not the end of your service to others. It is the beginning of service that actually serves, love that actually heals, help that actually helps. The Saviour complex promises you meaning through martyrdom, purpose through pain, worth through woundedness. But these are false promises, empty bargains, contracts written in blood and signed with tears. The meaning you seek cannot be found in the endless cycle of rescue and sacrifice. It can only be found in the courageous act of becoming who you truly are. Your true purpose is not to save others from their darkness. It is to embody the light that shows them their own capacity for illumination. Your true worth is not measured by your ability to fix what is broken in others. It is inherent in your very existence. Your true service is not the endless giving of what you do not have. It is the generous sharing of what you have discovered in the depths of your own being. This is the paradox of the Saviour complex. In trying to save everyone else, you lose the very thing the world needs most from you: your authentic self, your genuine love, your whole presence, your true service. The world has enough broken healers, enough wounded rescuers, enough martyrs who bleed for others while ignoring their own wounds. What the world needs is people who have done the work of healing themselves, who have learned to love themselves fully, who have discovered their own wholeness. These people do not need to save others because they understand that everyone is capable of saving themselves. They do not need to rescue others because they trust in others' inherent strength. They do not need to sacrifice themselves because they know that love does not require such sacrifice. They serve from fullness, love from wholeness, help from strength. They offer presence without possession, support without sacrifice, compassion without codependency. They are living examples of what it means to be fully human, fully alive, fully present in one's own life, while remaining open to the lives of others. This is who you are called to become. This is the person you were always meant to be. This is the gift you came here to give, not your endless service, your constant availability, your perpetual sacrifice, but your authentic presence, your genuine love, your whole self. The journey begins with a single step: the decision to stop trying to save everyone else and start living your own life. The decision to honor your own needs, to respect your own boundaries, to love your own self. The decision to become the person you have always been beneath the costume of the Saviour, the mask of the rescuer, the performance of the martyr. This decision is not made once. It is made again and again, choice by choice, moment by moment, day by day. It is the ongoing commitment to yourself, to your own growth, to your own healing. It is the sacred vow to show up fully in your own life, to be present to your own experience, to love yourself as fiercely as you have loved others. This decision will be met with resistance from every corner of your life. The people who have grown comfortable with your self-abandonment will not celebrate your awakening. They will escalate their crises, amplify their neediness, weaponize your compassion against you. They will call you selfish for choosing yourself, cold for setting boundaries, cruel for refusing to carry what was never yours to bear. But their resistance is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that you are finally right. It is proof that the system of dysfunction that has sustained itself through your sacrifice is beginning to crumble. And something dying will always fight hardest in its final moments. The path forward requires you to become intimate with disappointment, not the disappointment of others, which you have spent your life avoiding, but your own disappointment in discovering how much of your life you have given away. The grief of recognizing how many of your own dreams you have sacrificed on the altar of others' comfort. The rage of understanding how much of your own power you have surrendered to maintain the illusion of being needed. This grief is holy. This rage is sacred. They are not emotions to be fixed or healed or transformed into something more palatable. They are the natural response of a soul that has finally recognized its own worth, its own value, its own right to exist without justification. Feel them fully. Let them burn through you like cleansing fire. Let them wash over you like purifying rain. They are not punishment for your past choices. They are fuel for your future freedom. They are the energy that will propel you toward the life you were always meant to live. The savior complex dies hard because it has been your identity for so long that you cannot imagine who you might be without it. But beneath the helper, beneath the rescuer, beneath the one who gives until empty, there is a person who has been waiting patiently for permission to exist. A person with preferences and desires and dreams that have nothing to do with fixing anyone else. This person is not selfish, this person is not cruel, this person is not cold, this person is simply whole. And wholeness, true wholeness, is the greatest gift you can offer, a world that has forgotten what it looks like to be complete. When you stop trying to save everyone else, you give them the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to save themselves. When you stop absorbing everyone else's emotions, you teach them that their feelings are manageable. When you stop solving everyone else's problems, you demonstrate that they are capable of finding their own solutions. Your withdrawal from the role of savior is not abandonment, it is liberation. It liberates others to discover their own strength. It liberates you to discover your own life. And it liberates love itself from the prison of transaction, the chains of obligation, the distortion of need. This is the sacred work of our time, learning to love without losing ourselves, to serve without becoming servants, to help without becoming hollow. It is the work of becoming fully human while remaining fully compassionate, fully present while remaining fully boundaried, fully open while remaining fully sovereign. The world does not need more martyrs. It needs more people who have learned to love themselves so fully that their love for others flows from abundance rather than emptiness, from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion. You are not here to save the world by disappearing into it. You are here to serve the world by becoming fully yourself. And in becoming fully yourself, you become a living invitation for others to do the same. You become proof that it is possible to love without losing yourself, to care without becoming consumed, to serve without sacrificing your soul. This is not the end of your service to others. It is the beginning of service that actually serves. This is not the death of your compassion. It is the birth of compassion that actually heals. This is not the abandonment of love. It is the discovery of love in its truest form. The savior complex ends where authentic love begins, where genuine service flows from wholeness rather than woundedness, where true healing happens through presence rather than performance, where real transformation occurs through example rather than sacrifice. This is your invitation. This is your calling. This is your path home to yourself. The journey is not easy, but it is necessary. The destination is not comfort, but authenticity. The reward is not the gratitude of those you save, but the deep satisfaction of a life lived in truth. You are not here to save the world, you are here to save yourself. And in saving yourself, you become capable of serving the world in ways the Saviour complex never could. You become a beacon of possibility, a living demonstration that love does not require sacrifice, that service does not demand self-destruction, that helping others does not mean losing yourself. The time has come to lay down the burden of everyone else's salvation and pick up the sacred responsibility of your own. The time has come to stop trying to save the world and start living your own life. The time has come to discover who you are when you are not trying to be everything to everyone else. This discovery is not selfish, it is essential. It is not abandonment, it is arrival. It is not the end of your service to others, it is the beginning of service that actually serves, love that actually heals, help that actually helps. The Saviour complex has served its purpose. It kept you safe when you were small and powerless. It gave you a sense of worth when you believed you had none. It provided connection when you feared abandonment. But you are no longer small. You are no longer powerless. You no longer need to earn your place in the world through service to others. You belong here simply because you exist. You are worthy of love simply because you are. You have the right to your own life, your own dreams, your own happiness. You have the right to be seen, to be known, to be loved for who you are, rather than what you do. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of the story you were always meant to write. The story of a person who learned to love themselves so fully that their love for others became a force of liberation rather than limitation. The story of someone who discovered that true service flows from wholeness rather than woundedness, from strength rather than sacrifice, from choice rather than compulsion. The world is waiting for this story, not because it needs another saviour, but because it needs another person who has learned to save themselves, another soul who has discovered that the greatest gift we can offer others is not our sacrifice, but our wholeness, not our martyrdom, but our authenticity, not our disappearance, but our full presence. This is the great work. This is the sacred task. This is the journey from saviour to sovereign, from rescuer to whole human being, from martyr to mystic. The path is before you, the choice is yours, the time is now.